Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, also streamed on expertcresecrets.com, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, is the best way for you to exit your highly appreciated cryptocurrency, primary home, investment, real estate, save a failed 1031 exchange. Also, you can create and preserve more wealth. I'm your host, Brett Swartz. In each episode, I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, business, and wealth minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. Hey, I'm excited about our next guest. By age 27, she quit her job and retired. And now is living over $15,000 per month in passive income. And she's on a mission to empower female millennials to take control of their financial future. And, she believes we are in a financial education crisis, which we're going to talk about, and so much more. Please welcome to the show with me, Rachel Richard. Rachel, how are you?
Hey, Brett, I am wonderful. How are you?
Hey, better than I deserve. Excited to have you on the show and to dive right into the secrets to retiring by age 27. So inspiring. But before we go there, could you give our listeners a little bit more about your background and your current focus?
Yeah, absolutely. My background, I'm a former financial advisor. So that was my first job out of college. I majored in financial economics. I experienced a lot of verbal abuse in one of my early jobs, where I decided I did not want to ever be trapped in a job or tormented by an employer. And I really wanted to become financially independent. So I started looking for ways to build passive income. And in 2017 is kind of when things started happening for my husband and I. So that year we invested in our first rental property. And later that year, I published my first best-selling book, Money Honey. So we had these two passive income streams, rental income and royalty income, and we focused on growing those as much as we possibly could over the next few years. So fast forward to basically 2019 is when I was able to quit my job and retire, and I was living off over $15,000 a month in passive income. And now we're traveling all over the US. I am continuing to help women learn about financial literacy and create more books and courses and just try to have an impact.
Amazing. We're going to dive into those steps and some of those secrets in the book. But before we go into that part of the episode, I want to take a step back. I want you to picture back. It could be the early college days or the high school days, when you were younger. I believe we've all been given certain gifts in this life, and these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing and help to others. I believe they're God-given gifts. Some people think they're strengths or superpowers, but I'm curious, maybe what are those one or two gifts that you believe you were given, and how does that help how you help and bless people today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say early on, I grew up in a household where money was always a stressor. And for example, and I grew up in a very wealthy county too, to give some context. Some of the kids in my high school got brand new BMWs when they turned 16. So it was very unrealistic bubble to grow up in. And my family was not operating that way. We were always on a strict budget. There was never enough money. It was always stressful. So I grew up with a lot of fears around money. And they say that fear can be paralyzing or motivating. Luckily for me, it was motivating. And I do think one of my strengths is the ability to just be so motivated by something that I take action. And I really think that what sets people apart from being successful or being able to achieve financial freedom and those that can't quite get there is just the ability to take action. Because we can consume knowledge all day and we can learn all day, but it's once you take that first step and start implementing, that's when you're going to get somewhere. So that's one of my strengths. And then I would say another strength of mine is my ability to make a boring topic into something that is fun and engaging. So when I first started writing Money Honey, this was 2017. By that point, all of my family and friends were coming to me for financial advice, which I loved. That is what I love to do. At the same time, I began to wonder, well, why aren't they learning or reading books on their own? And then I realized, oh yeah, that's because personal finance is boring, right? It's complex. It's intimidating. It's dry. No wonder people don't like to learn about it. So I thought to myself, well, how can I make this topic sassy and fun and simple? And that's where the idea for Money Honey came from. It did way better than I thought. It really resonated with female millennials. And so that's what I would say is my other strength, is just being able to teach about finance in a way that people find fun and relatable.
Phenomenal. So taking motivation and fear and allowing that to fuel you to action, right? Versus just complacency or non-action. And then the
Mhm.
second one is taking something that might be boring to a lot of people or everybody, such as finance, and making that fun and engaging. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, absolutely.
Amazing. By the way, you can learn more about Rachel Richards at moneyhoneyrachel.com. That's moneyhoneyrachel.com. Okay, great. So now let's dive into the number one secret to being able to retire by age 27. So, what's the first step or your journey to be able to achieve such a thing?
So I really had to look at the way that we approach retirement from a completely different lens. So I'll kind of myth bust this whole retirement theory, basically. The way we've traditionally approached retirement is that we work for 40 years, a 9 to 5 job, we invest in the stock market, and then by age 65, we've accumulated enough wealth that we can live off of that for the rest of our lives. That's what I call the nest egg theory, because you accumulate this nest egg and then you live off of that for the rest of your life. Here's the thing. That used to work really well, but times have changed and the way we've approached retirement hasn't changed at all. And that's why people are in a lot of financial trouble right now. So, this is where this concept of passive income comes into play. Passive income, the way I define it, is that it is money that is earned with little to no ongoing work. Is it a get rich quick scheme? No, absolutely not. It takes time and or money to create passive income. But the epiphany I had is that once your passive income exceeds your living expenses, you're retired, you're financially independent. So my goal, instead of trying to save up $2 million by age 65, became let's try to generate five or six or $8,000 a month in passive income. I think passive income is a lot more attainable. So that's what I would say is the number one step is to start changing the way that you're approaching retirement. And with passive income specifically, the first thing you want to do is to ask yourself, do I have more time or do I have more money? Because you will need one or the other or both to create passive income streams. Now, if you're anything like I used to be, you would say, well, neither. I don't have time and I don't have money. So the follow up question is which one's going to be easier for you to create? Will it be easier for you to free up time or to create more money? That is the very first thing to do if you want to retire early.
Excellent. So let me see if I encapsulate some of that. So number one secret is to change the way we approach the entire concept of retirement. It's no longer the nest egg theory. Work for 40 years, develop a bunch of money, and then just live off of the interest of that. And to truly get passive and to be able to retire today would be to do something that's going to replace all of your income or all of your expenses, right?
Hmm.
And be able to live off of that and to have little to no ongoing work. I like the way you put that, little to no ongoing work, right? Because that work part of it is that energy, that stress, that thing that ties you to the location, right? You're traveling in Oregon this week, right? And you'll be in Napa maybe next week. I'm here in California, right? I was able to travel with my wife to Cabo, and then going to Dallas, doing all these different trips. Part of it because what I do with, for my work is virtual, right? So I love the idea of little to no ongoing work, but also that location and that time and that energy freedom. Is that a fair summary? Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. And I would add, a lot of people ask, well, how passive is it? A lot of people think that passive income is just money coming in and you don't have to do a thing. And there are some passive income streams like that. For example, if you have enough money to invest into the stock market and live off of the dividend income, that's extremely passive. That's as passive as it gets. The problem with that is normally you have to have 1 million or 2 million or 3 million invested in order to generate meaningful revenue. For the rest of the passive income streams I talk about, you can expect to work a couple hours a week or a few hours a month to maintain those income streams. So it's not entirely passive, but I do consider it way more passive than working a 9 to 5 job.
Excellent. So let's dive into maybe some of those passive income streams, or even the second step, if we're going too far. If there's another step in between that.
Yeah, for sure. I would say so we can start talking about passive income streams. One of the big ones that's very popular is rental property income. So this is a traditional one. This gets discussed a lot. This is where you invest in a rental property, you rent it out for more than the mortgage and expenses, and then you take home cash flow or passive income per month. The reason I love rental property investing so much is because there's more benefits than just the passive income. You're also building up equity in the house. So after 30 years, you have a house that's fully been paid for by your tenants, and you've only invested a 20% down payment. So that's a huge benefit. There's also potential appreciation and really amazing tax benefits that go along with rental property investing. So that's a popular one. That's one of my favorites for all of those reasons. And another one that I talk a lot about is royalty income. Royalty income can come from so many different things: books, online courses. There's even something that I refer to as print on demand. But let's take a book as an example. I have 2 best-selling books. I spent months and months on these books, writing them, marketing them, launching them. So it was a lot of upfront work. But now that they've launched and they are successful, I've been able to maintain this income over time. And I make $7,000 plus per month in profits from my 2 best-selling books. I'm not having to do much ongoing work at this point. I do some, podcasting and marketing to get my name out there, but it's nothing like the months that it took me to write the book in the first place. So that's another great example of passive income.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so real estate, which our listeners are very familiar with, right? Especially cash flow producing real estate, you get the depreciation offsets the income, right? You hire the property management, you buy the deal, you add the value, right? Forced appreciation. That's I think to me, it's hands down the number one way to build wealth, right? Long-term wealth. Risk adjusted, of course, something you can control, get hands on, right? So love that. Now, key for that obviously is buying right, not overpaying, not taking on too much debt. Make sure you're underwriting the property properly, right? Right now, values are so crazy high. It's part of why we're not a big fan of the 1031 exchange, because it forces you to we call it the 45-day engagement, 180-day marriage, right? You're typically selling high, buying higher, which we'll touch on here in a minute. But I like the royalty income because, by the way, I'm coming out with a book, Rachel, coming up here for those who don't
Yay!
know. And I've never, this is like brand new first book. And that would be cool to get some royalty income on that. So excellent. So now once you've established the passive income and you have that, what's the next part of this transformation for you, or how did it go for you? Right? Like, because I imagine these were small steps, right? You maybe were working beforehand and then working a little bit less. And then finally you're like, okay, rip the Band-Aid off. Like I'm going full, retirement mode. Can you walk us through that little journey for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people who want to become entrepreneurs or want to retire early, sometimes they make the mistake of, there's a lot of advice given out there where it's like, take a leap of faith and quit your job and the net will appear. And I hate that advice. And a lot of entrepreneurs fall into that trap. And so they'll say, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to become a real estate investor. I'm going to write a book. So I'm going to go ahead and quit my job so that I can pursue these other interests. Now, for some people, that can be a scary enough thing where, again, it motivates them into action. And so they're forced to do these things that they want to do. That, I would say, is the rare exception. For most people, I would not recommend quitting your job without having other income coming in, because you don't want to be operating from a place of panic or desperation as you're starting to try to invest in real estate or create an online course or invest in a laundromat or whatever it is. You don't want to be operating from a place of desperation. So that's kind of the first thing that I tell people is make sure your income streams are monetized in some way before you quit your job. My personal approach was very conservative. I wanted to fully replace my full-time job salary before I quit. So we were looking at, by then I was making almost 90 grand. So we were looking at, making 8,000 a month in passive income before I could quit. And that's what happened in 2019. Really, 2018 is when we got to that point with our rental income and the royalties from my books. But it took me a full year to go through with quitting my job because it was so scary. I was feeling very unsure and uncertain. I was dealing with a lot of imposter syndrome. I kept worrying about what other people would think of me. I kept saying to myself, am I crazy? I am about to walk away from a lucrative corporate finance career. What if this is the worst mistake I ever make? But finally, in the end, when I went through with it, I realized, okay, this is the best thing I've ever done. And I'm so glad that I finally ended up quitting.
So, what does life feel like now to be able to travel and to have that freedom, that time, and that energy? Can you kind of paint that picture? What's the average week for Rachel Richards look like these days?
Yes, it's amazing. I feel so fortunate. I mean, I've worked hard for this for sure. There's so much sacrifice and tears that went into this for many, many years before I got to this point, but I feel very fortunate to be here. And what's interesting is that I feel like the more money I make or the larger my business grows, the less I have to work to sustain that level of income, which is really exciting because I feel like there's no limit to how much you can make if you're not trading your time for your money. And that's the key. So, a typical day, we're traveling all around the US now. We have travel plans for the rest of the year. I do I probably work from 10 to 3 most days. And, I'll do a couple calls and a couple appointments per week. Otherwise, I'm trying to create content and figure out what is the next program I want to offer for people. And I'm really working on creating TikTok content. So that's been a big thing recently. And then normally my husband and I go to the gym at 3 for an hour or two. And then we'll go on a walk or we'll go hike or we'll go to the beach since we're at the coast now. But it's a lot of fun. I'm living a dream.
Living the dream, love it, right? But you did say how the blood, sweat, and tears, right, to get to where you're at, and the sacrifice and the fear that you had to overcome. So help us right now, right? Someone could say, "Well, Rachel, it's easy for you. You were a financial advisor, or it's easy for you. You're able to write a best-selling book, or So walk us through those let's say most challenging days, right? Give us that so that people can really relate on that level as well.
Yes, and I'm smiling because I get that a lot. It's easy for you. Oh my gosh, it was not easy for me. No part of this journey was easy. Did I have advantages in certain areas? Yes, of course. It was a big advantage to be a financial advisor and then to write a finance book because I had the credibility. Then again, I put myself into that career path for a reason. So yes, there were advantages, but the journey was not easy, and it is possible for anyone out there. There were days there was a period of 2 years where I think that Andrew and I were both working 80-hour weeks. So we were working full-time jobs, 40 to 50 hours a week. On the weekends, we were spending most of our time acquiring and managing rental properties. And then in the evenings, I was writing my books. So it was exhausting. I remember we didn't have a life on the weekends for 2 years straight. All of our friends would be doing social events, family stuff, whatever, just relaxing, doing whatever they wanted to do, laying around and doing nothing if that's what they wanted to do. And we would be down at our rental properties every single weekend. There were days leading up to my book launch, weeks leading up to my book launch, where my husband would wake up in the middle of the night at 2:30 a.m. and find me in the closet typing and working because I had so much anxiety that I couldn't sleep. And I figured if I can't sleep, I might as well be productive. So it was very stressful. I did even deal with anxiety at one point, where I started to go to see a therapist. So I don't want to underscore the importance of mental health in all of this because you don't ever want to go so hard that your mental health is suffering. And unfortunately, that is what I did. So there are some really important learning lessons and things that I know now not to do and really protecting your mindset and your emotions and your health. But yes, very, very challenging.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think that really helps. I think a lot of people, right? Similar story with myself at Marcus and Millichap as a real estate broker. Trying to make it in the business, everything crashes, falls apart, and I went from making a little bit of money to nothing overnight. And my wife and I, we moved in with my brother into a small condo with our first baby daughter. Right. And now I'm working nights and weekends at Cheesecake Factory and working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, and did that for 2 years. And so while I was still trying to build the dream of commercial real estate brokerage, which I think all of these things happen for a reason. My clients were going through a big challenge at that time as well. And we help them defer tax now and escape feeling trapped by these assets with too much debt, not enough liquidity, not enough diversification. But the point is, if I hadn't gone through those things, right, I wouldn't be in the position to help people that I help today. So I want you to connect that. What's the one thing that you've learned in that challenging period that you most can give to the students and the folks that you help out today? What's that one thing that you really want to make sure if you could tell them or impart to them right now? What is it?
I appreciate this question so much. There's so many things, but one that I want to say is don't let your ego get in the way. One thing I love about your story, Brett, is that you didn't let your pride get in the way. And that's what stops a lot of people from achieving financial freedom because they're not willing to make the sacrifices that they need to make in order to get there. So for example, I worked with a client a while ago who was, asking me what are some ways I can make more income? And I was outlining all these different ways, drive an Uber, drive a Lyft, mow lawns, whatever, deliver pizza, I remember saying. And he was like, I'm not going to deliver pizza, basically implying that that was beneath him. And so my question back to him was, is your pride worth more than achieving financial freedom? Which one's more important to you, your pride or achieving financial freedom? Because you're not better, nothing's too beneath you to do. You have to be willing to make those kind of sacrifices. And that's why I love your story, Brett, because you were willing to work at Cheesecake Factory and you were willing to move into a condo when you didn't have any income coming in, whereas other people might turn their nose up at that. So the fact that you were able to make those sacrifices is why you're where you are today. And I love that part of your story.
Well, thanks so much. That means a lot. And it wasn't just me, right? It was my wife who supported that. Like she was,
Yes.
she had veto power. So I was like, so we, in order to make this thing work, because we're in debt and we're running out, like we need to move in with Ryan. Oh, okay. Or let me think about it. And I told her, of course, the vision, right? This is the vision, but it wasn't without the struggle of, let's just say different voices saying, go get a real job. What are you
Yes.
doing? You got a baby at home, like all of those things. But inside, I felt like I'm getting amazing mentors, amazing coaching. I'm growing a ton. And I knew that's where I was supposed to be. And I was going to be willing to do whatever it takes. And so I always share that part because on this other side of success, people say, oh, it seems like you're an overnight success. It's like, no, like literally, like it was the worst. Like it was,
Yeah.
and it was not just 1 year, 2 years, it was 3, 4 years, 5 years. And finally we start to get some momentum, caught some breaks, but we had tons of family support, tons of friends support. My brother let me move in with him too, which was cool. All
Hmm.
that being said, that's, I want to encourage anyone who's listening to this story and listening to Rachel's story that, you might have to be willing to do what it takes, right? To cut your expenses, to get your ego out of the way, so that if your vision is big enough, right? And then maybe you can comment on this, Rachel, right? When the why is big enough, the how gets easy, right?
Oh,
But I love the way
totally.
you put that. Is your pride worth more than achieving your financial future, right? So is your why big enough or bigger than the how, what it's going to take to get there, right? And if it's not, then maybe go work back on your why, work on your vision, work on your purpose, because when that fuels us, right, when we're getting fueled by things that are external or let's say eternal, right, versus being fueled on what stuff that's temporary, right, then it changes the game. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100%. You have to be so clear on your why and your motivation, and it's going to change throughout life. I remember when I was entering into college, I had a huge fear of going into student debt because I had seen how crippling it can be for people. My parents were not able to help me with my college tuition, so I was kind of all on my own. And I was like, how am I going to pay for this? I don't want to graduate with debt. I started selling Cutco knives. I don't know if you've heard of Cutco cutlery, Brett, but
Oh,
that's what
I
this.
have. Those things are amazing. Just careful to catch your hand off. But yeah,
Yeah,
go.
you can cut your hand off for sure. They're the best, and that is what I did to pay my way through college. But it was this fear of graduating with debt, and that's why I worked so hard. I don't think I've ever worked harder than in my life than I did those summers selling Cutco. I set sales records, I paid my way through school, and it was an expensive private college that was like 40 grand a year. I paid for all of that on my own, and it's just
Wow.
because I had a big enough why. I think one thing you can do is ask yourself, what is going to get me out of bed at 5 a.m. in the morning every day? What is motivating enough or inspiring enough to me that I'm going to want to get out of bed at 5 a.m. every day? So, not only that, ask yourself that and put your why everywhere. Put it on your mirror, put it on your somewhere on your dash in your car where you're going to see it consistently and be reminded of it. Because I promise there's going to be times where you're sitting in your car defeated or you don't want to get up in the morning or wherever you may be. You just want to give up. And if you don't have that why in front of you, it'll be a lot easier to give up and to give in.
Amazing. Rachel Richards. You can find more about Rachel at moneyhoneyrachel.com. That's moneyhoneyrachel.com. So we'll do one question. We're going to focus a little bit on capital gains tax, 1031 exchange, like I said before in the earlier show. I'm curious what you think on these things. And then we'll dive into the lightning round. So here's the next question. So what's the biggest frustration, Rachel, for yourself or your clients when it comes to capital gains tax deferral and the 1031 exchange?
For me, I'm dealing with this right now, Brett. So I've sold two properties, both of which had enormous capital gains. I have another one under contract that I'm selling. I should be interviewing you for this part of the podcast. What do I do? I think the biggest frustration is, like you said, being pressured into finding another investment in this current market. I don't have time to go out and do the things that I used to do to find off-market deals. So I've started trying to learn about syndications and 1031 exchange into a syndication. I've started to look for opportunity zone syndications so that the tax can be eliminated completely. I think the biggest frustration I personally have is the lack of time to be able to do the due diligence on these syndications and to then feel comfortable investing. So that's where I am right now. I'm just stuck because I don't have time to do all the analysis.
Yeah, we call it the shotgun wedding, right? You got the 45 days to get engaged and 135 days left to get married. And we found that it's exactly what happened for a lot of my clients in the '08 crash. You see, in '04, '05, '06, '07, they loved to be sellers, but they hated to be buyers, right? Because they felt like they're overpaying for properties. And they actually, a lot of them knew they were overpaying, but they felt trapped by that 30 to 50% in capital gains tax and depreciation recapture. Oh, by the way, Biden is proposing to increase the 20 to about 40 federal, which would make it about 50 to 70% for some of our clients, right?
Whew.
And so it's a big, big thing, and it's a lot of your gain. And so if you can sell, diversify, pay off debt, get liquidity, right? And then purchase property at any time. We call that optimal timing. That's when you put the power back in your hands versus it putting it into that seller that you're trying to negotiate with and having to overpay for. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you can learn more about that at capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Everybody, that's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. All that being said, Rachel, are you ready for the lightning round?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. So knowing what you know now, if you can go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one gold nugget you'd make sure to tell yourself to do?
Um, Let me go back to my 18-year-old self. I would tell her, because I waited until I was 24 to start investing in real estate. I would tell my 18-year-old self to stop waiting. There's no reason why you can't start investing now. I held myself back for many reasons. Oh, I need more money. I don't have enough knowledge. I don't have enough experience. And if I knew then what I know now, I totally could have started investing sooner with zero money. So there's this quote by Zig Ziglar that I'll share. He says, "You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great."
I love that quote. I love Zig, and I have felt like I've heard that one. I'm
Yeah.
gonna write that one down. Excellent. Second question. Number one book, and it can be yours, that you've gifted or recommended the most in the past year.
I mean, I love my books, but I would say for somebody else's book, one of my favorite business books is The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco. It's just so transformational from a consumer mindset to a producer mindset. I love that one. And then on a more personal or self-help note, I would say The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod absolutely changed my life, and I recommend it to everybody.
I second that second one, and I haven't had a Millionaire Fastlane. It sounds good too. Awesome. Third question. Number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by.
The theme would be to give value first and ask for something later. If you can approach any connection or networking or as a leader, always seek to give value. That is how you build a platform. That's how you build trust and credibility. And that's the only way you can sell in the long term. So I think a lot of people out there make the mistake of pushing their products or selling or thinking about themselves instead of acting in a more selfless way and saying, how can I give value today? And it will come back to you in by a multiplied factor of 5 to 10 times if you can approach it that way.
Beautiful. Absolutely love that. Second to last question. What are you most curious about right now?
What am I the most curious about? This is totally random, but I'm the most curious about the Italian language. It has been on my bucket list for a long time to become fluent in Italian. And now that I'm enjoying a much more lifestyle with a lot more freedom, I'm starting to think of what are some of these other bucket list items that I want to check off. Like, I love achieving the business achievements and growing my business and making more money, but there are all these other hobbies and passions that have fallen to the wayside for so long that I can now do. So I'm curious to start learning about the Italian language.
That is so cool. My wife and I and family might be traveling to France, and she grew up taking French and loving the French language. And now she's all inspired to start learning it again. So yeah, it's nice when you
Amazing.
have that time and the energy and that freedom, right? To go learn another language or to travel, do that stuff. So this is what's so inspiring about your story. So thank you so much for sharing that. The last question, after all your success, Rachel, being able to retire at 27, owning investment real estate, best-selling books, and helping so many people, be inspired and try to do the same. I'm curious, how do you stay centered in your values, and how do you stay encouraged to reach forward for new heights?
I go back to advice that I heard from Hal Elrod at one of his conferences. He talked about living in complete alignment with your values. And it was so inspirational to hear from him and how he realized he wasn't living in complete alignment with his values and doing things like prioritizing his health and his family. And once he committed to that single-mindedly, he just started canceling contracts, he started canceling engagements, and he realized I'm not living in alignment with my values. And this is something my husband and I talk about constantly. Our three values are number one, health, number two, family, and number three, freedom. Freedom doesn't come first. So that means our passive income and our money doesn't come first. Health comes first, then family, then freedom. So it's just about keeping that in front of us and keeping focused on it in that order.
That is so much wisdom there. Wow, that was worth another book that you could write, probably with Hal. You guys could do a co-book on this whole thing.
I got to interview him for my second one. So he's in my passive income aggressive retirement.
Amazing, amazing. And so, for our listeners, Rachel, who want to get in touch with you, would you remind them one last time where they can find you?
Yes. So my website's moneyhoneyrachel.com. And Brett, what I would love to do for your listeners is if anyone wants to download my passive income starter kit, I am happy to give that for free today. So you can go to moneyhoneyrachel.com/bonus to download.
Beautiful. Rachel Richards, I'm better for having you on the show. I'm sure our listeners are better for having listening to this podcast. I want to encourage you to keep using the gifts that you're giving, which is taking fear and motivation and to allow that to fuel you to action, right? To actually do something, taking something that's boring, turning it into something fun and engaging, and then just continuing on the mission that you're on to help more people become financially free, including female entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for being on the show. And thanks. Maybe we'll have you back again for sure, because especially on your next book or anything else, I'd love to have you back on the show. And I also want to thank our listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions Podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, to save your failed 1031 exchange. Rachel even said it, right? There's no inventory. Prices are through the roof. Time is not on your side with the 1031 forced marriage. Use the Deferred Sales Trust to get your time and energy back to invest. By the way, this thing works for primary homes. It works for cryptocurrency. It works for business sales. Oh my gosh, right? It works for just about anything that's highly appreciated. Public stock, private stock. Go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to make sure you have a plan in place. We appreciate you listening to this. We're also streaming on expertcresecrets.com. Remember that as well. If you are a real estate professional, learning about the Deferred Sales Trust, wanting to grow your business, make sure you check that out. Appreciate everyone listening to the show. And